Ty Brady here with Brady Insurance Marketing and the Ty Brady Way. As a successful entrepreneur myself, I'm passionate in helping other entrepreneurs do the same as they rise from rags to riches and get inspired each week on the stories they tell here at the Ty Brady Way. Welcome back to the Ty Brady Way. Today, I get to interview Tim Packer on the show today, and it's always exciting when I get to read their bios and a little bit about them. But Tim, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Tim, I noticed that one of the things that jumped out to me is that you were a detective at one point, but how did you, I want to go back a little bit. So did you always have a love for art when you were growing up and through high school, or was it something you found later in life?
No, that was always the plan. From the time I was 12, I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. I took commercial art in high school, took graphic design in college. I kind of graduated early. I started early and I skipped a year. So I was in college at 17, out of college at 19. And I thought I was going to take the world by storm. And after 2 years, I'd had 3 different jobs in the graphic design industry, all of them like super entry level, super mind numbing. And I just came to the decision that, you know what, the dream wasn't going to happen for me. I wasn't talented enough to make a good living as an artist. So then I started looking for plan B, and the Toronto police force was hiring. So that started a whole other part of my life that went on for 18 years.
You brought up an interesting point. You said that you didn't feel like you were good enough in those first couple of years. Was that, why was that? Just you weren't finding your groove? Was it maybe not the right environment?
I think it was mainly that, again, at the time, I think I was kind of, adhering to the fixed mindset, where your talent is something that is kind of fixed. And when I looked around, most of the people that were in the industry were much more talented than me. Their skills were much, much higher. I didn't realize that kind of decision would have been much more accurate if I just realized I wasn't talented enough yet. But then I could become talented enough, because I was only 19 years old and I was comparing myself to people who were in their late 20s, in their 30s, even in their 40s. I didn't realize that, however talented they were at that point, they didn't just kind of get, the wand hitting them on the forehead and said, here's your talent. That talent was developed over 20 or 30 years. So, that was the big thing. And then when I was in my 30s, that's when I kind of was first exposed to the idea of the growth mindset, and that your talent it's something you actually develop and earn. And so I decided, I still didn't 100% believe in it, but I thought, well, maybe it's true. So I'm going to act as though I believe it for a year. So I spent a year just really getting back into my art and really, really focusing on improving my skills and all the concepts and making sure I painted 3 times a week. And a funny thing happened. By the end of that year, I was much more talented than I was at the beginning. And then within 3 years, my wife and I were talking about not if I leave the police force to paint full time, but when. And so that was 2000. I ended up quitting my job, cashing in my pension, and starting this life as a full-time artist.
Wow, there's so much there. The first thing I wanted to talk about is you made the comment, you weren't there yet.
Yeah.
And did you listen to somebody where you said, hey, I just need to, and then you said, hey, I'm going to do this for a year. You acted on what you believed you could do, but then you acted. So was it belief? Was it somebody you talked to? Was it just, hey, one day you said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to ignore all the negative thoughts in my head?
It was actually an article that I read. It was an interview with a Canadian artist by the name of Harley Brown. And it was actually in a book that was called Becoming a Successful Artist. And so I was a fraud detective. So I was very big on kind of like analyzing stuff. And so I did a lot of research when I was thinking about getting back into art. And in this one interview, Harley Brown said, it's not about talent if you think about what your natural aptitudes are. He said, it's all learnable, and that if you were willing to work hard enough, I started with this. He said, I guarantee you 100% you can be successful. Not 98, not 99, but you've got to put in the work. And I remember just thinking, to heck with you, Harley Brown. Like, yeah, you're probably one of those gifted people. And they all say that they were just normal people, but worked hard at it. And part of me didn't want to believe it, because that meant I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I gave up on my dream too soon, because I really liked being a police officer. But I loved painting. But that little voice in the back of my head said, what if he's right? And again, I didn't fully believe it, but I thought, well, let me test it. And so it's like, I'm going to pretend that I believe it for the next year. And turns out Harley Brown was right. And the growth mindset is a real thing.
It's pretty wild to think. I think everyone's mind drifts. I think everyone's mind has feelings of doubt or I'm not good enough. But like you, if you get past that and you act, then you find out that it was right. You know, like reading that article, you're like, it was right. But as you're sitting there saying, hey, I'm going to commit. I heard you say 3 days a week. So you're not getting paid.
No, I was just working on my art.
Just time. So you're like, hey, I'm going to work just like exercise or anything you want to get good at. You know, you've heard of the 100-hour rule. It's 100 hours you need discipline. Yeah. So you just took the time and said, hey, I'm going to do this. What I believe happens over time is it builds belief, right? It builds confidence. Yeah. And then you're like, wait a minute. And you even said yourself, my art got better.
Oh, it got a lot better. And the other thing that I did too, I realized that it wasn't going to be good enough just to push paint around for an hour or for 3 hours, 3 times a week. I really decided that what I needed to do was kind of look at kind of what were the things that I wasn't very good at, but that were absolutely necessary to become an accomplished artist. And then focused, I call those dominoes, focus on knocking those down, the things that are going to have the biggest impact down the road and doing the hard work. Because a lot of people, again, that whole 10,000 hours with Malcolm Gladwell, it's got like, I got more than 10,000 hours of golf in me and I'm still a 20 handicap because I really enjoy playing mediocre golf, right? So, but you know, there's young guys here at the club where I'm a member that they've only been golfing for 2 years and they're like a 2 handicap because they spend all of their time working on improving their game. So I kind of looked at tackling art that way, looking at, okay, instead of avoiding the things that I wasn't good at, really digging deep and mastering them, and then just kind of what's next. And that's literally been kind of my strategy for the last 26 years, whether it's art, whether it's kind of with my online art academy, social media, kind of we self-publish our prints, now I've just released my book. But I'm just a huge believer in that, you know, you find out what's the one thing that right now, if I mastered that, would have the biggest impact on kind of, well, it used to be my art, but now it's my business. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to work my butt off to master that. And then I'm going to look for the next thing. And it works. And it's never been easier because information is just at our fingertips now with our phones. So, I mean, yeah, it really works.
So you take the time, basically time away from other things that you may want to be doing to improve on the things that you think you need to get better at. And then you're able to develop this skill. And now I see, you know, a lot of things, it seems to me that you're giving back. I mean, you mentioned, okay, so is it now that you've mastered the mindset, you've mastered being successful, you're giving back. And so what are you doing now to give back in your art or other things of life?
Well, I've been doing, so it's kind of a long story about how it happened, but I mean, for the longest time, I was just working on me being successful. And in 2015, I had an opening at a gallery in Toronto that was just like, it was like the movie version of an opening. People were lined up waiting to come in. They came in, there was like drinks being passed around, someone playing live music, and the paintings were just red dots were going up on the wall. And I realized that was towards the end of the year that I was going to make over $250,000 that year from the sale of my art. And that was just so far beyond the dream. And I remember when I was there, like I was basking in the glow, but very quickly another feeling came over me. And I didn't know what it was at first, but looking back, I know it was responsibility. And I realized that I wasn't special. I was not even the top 3 or 4 in any of my art classes, even in high school. But I know what I had done to get where I was now. And I knew that there's so many artists out there that would give anything to be where I was in that moment, but they just don't know how to get there. So then I started my YouTube channel. I decided the next day I'm going to share everything I've learned, just as I'm a firm believer in karma, and karma is practical. So this was kind of like a give back to the art world that had given me so much. So I started putting my YouTube videos out there back in 2015. And I was just doing it as a side passion, no thought of monetizing. And then in 2020, I had a couple near-death experiences. My thyroid went crazy, and I kind of was lying there in the hospital a couple times on the gurney with my wife there, not sure if I was going to be there a few minutes from then. And I got through it, and I eventually got better. But over that time afterwards, I realized I really didn't have any regrets. I mean, the main feeling that came over me in those moments where I wasn't sure if I was going to be here was gratitude. But then there was one nagging regret, and that was that I'd been kind of playing it safe with the sharing of what I'd learned. And I had this kind of, turns out, a very selfish kind of philosophy that I'm just going to give my training away for free. I'm not going to charge artists. I'll make my money off of my rich clients. And then a number of people started telling me, well, you're being selfish here because you're only dedicating a small percentage of your time and no money to the whole teaching. If you really want to have impact, you should kind of look at creating a successful business with the teaching so that the more money you make, the more people you help. And so I decided if I got healthy, I would start my own line art academy. So we did that in 2020. And now we've had over 10,000 artists that could come through and take my courses. And now I just released my book, You Can Sell Your Art. So now my main focus really is on the business of sharing what I've learned to help other artists actually make a living from their art.
That's amazing. I can't help but think that at times we're prompted, we have intuition, and sometimes we act, sometimes we don't, but you acted on that. And people were saying, hey, it's selfish. And I believe the universe has a lot to give. Everything that's ever been done and could be done is there. And people look at they're like, oh, well, that's already been done before. And they're afraid of starting a business, or they're like, hey, I'm afraid of starting art, like you said. But there's a lot of people that would gravitate to your style of art and love your type of art because it hasn't all been done. It's there. Yeah. But you use the word yet again. It's not there yet, or you may not be there yet.
I think that's anytime anybody gives themselves, and I do that now, whenever we have kind of self-limiting thoughts where I'm not enough of whatever it is, just throw the yet on the end of it. And that's much more helpful. And it's actually accurate. Whatever it is, throw yet on the end of it. And that's like, okay, then go on and do what you need to do so that you can be, whether your drawing skill, your compositional skill, you're pushing your creativity, your ability to edit videos or kind of run a podcast, whatever. It's like, I don't know how to do that yet is a much, much better way than just saying, I don't know how to do that, or I'm not enough in any sort of way.
What would you tell somebody that, I think in life, a lot of with social media and all the things that people have access to, they look at your highlight reels and they look at where you're at now. What would you tell those people that aren't there yet, since we're on the word yet? And I think we are our own worst critics, and we get a lot of outside noise and people saying, oh, you'll never make it, and this and that, whenever you're trying to start a business. But what do you tell those folks?
Well, when you see somebody that's successful, you're seeing them at the end of the journey, and you're kind of assuming, we have this tendency to assume that they just somehow magically were anointed with this gift at birth, whatever it is, right? And you don't see the struggles that took place before. You don't see that, very few people start out of the gate hugely successful and hugely talented. Most of the people, when you see them, when they come to your attention because, wow, they are really talented and they are really successful, there's years and often decades of hard work and struggle and failures along the way that went into that. And that's what you have to understand, that, you're just seeing the end of the journey. You're not seeing all of the struggle that went on behind it. And I don't know anybody that's successful that hasn't had a lot of struggle in their life and hasn't had failures in their business and different things they've done. It's just part of the learning process.
It's nice to hear and talk to people that have, I don't talk a lot about my journey and how I failed multiple times and had to reinvent myself, or working 17 jobs in a year trying to find out what I'm going to do when I lost everything and building that over. And, I say that's the worst and best thing that ever happened to me, because it helped me look at other industries I probably wouldn't have looked at before now. I think back in a long time when I was going to college, and they took these tests, and it basically says, what are your pre-aptitude to do? And honestly, it was the military or the police force. And I didn't do either one of those or sales. And I ended up in sales, and I look back at it. I'm like, wow, how accurate was that, test I took? And then you had that background in police work. And how long was that career before you made that switch? And how hard was it the day you said, I'm done?
It was 18 years I was on the police force. And getting back to kind of the aptitudes too, like there's two schools of thought, right? One is follow what your aptitudes are. The other is follow what your passion is. I was always kind of, getting into 75% kind of in all of my art classes. I was much better in like the core subjects. And when I went through police college, I graduated with the highest mark of any of the 2,000 coppers that went through the Ontario Police College that year. And I was a big guy, really fit, really good with people. Like I was perfectly made to become a police officer, but that wasn't my passion. And so like with art, that's the thing that I was passionate about, but I wasn't kind of gifted and didn't have a natural aptitude compared to other people. But because I was passionate about it and I just, I worked at it and I loved doing the work, that's the thing that I've become very successful at. But when I left the police force, I mean, it's funny. My wife was a banker. She had a good job. And I was a detective in the commercial crime unit. So I was investigating frauds over $2 million. And I'd had the computer crime course, month-long course at the RCMP college in Ottawa. So I had a set of skills that I knew could translate into the private sector if the whole art thing didn't work out. So we had like a plan, right? We weren't going to lose our house if things didn't work out. Well, my wife and I had a conversation, and she was the one that actually suggested it's time to think about leaving and pursue your art full time. But she came at it from a banker's perspective. And she said, this is not about you being fulfilled. This is about what's in the best long-term financial interest of our family. And she said, I think that long-term, you could end up generating a lot more income from your art than you will from your police career and pension. And so she said to me, as long as it doesn't become clear that that's not going to happen, I'll support this. She said, you just need to tell me now that, that if it ever becomes clear, you'll put on a seat and get a job in corporate security. So that was the deal. And the good news is too, she was able to retire early because eventually things went so well. But leaving the police force to paint full time is the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Walking away from my pension. Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there that I call it golden gloves, right? That salary is just enough of a drug to keep you there. And all these people sitting there listening to the show, they may have a passion. They may have a desire to do something different. And like you did it part-time. I did it part-time. I went full-time in 2012 with my agency. I walked away from about $180,000 in guaranteed money, and I never looked back. I mean, I just severed ties and said, here we go. And it was make or break, burn the ship. And I burned it.
Yeah, I know that feeling. And I think it's important too, though, that people don't just decide today, I want to be an artist and quit their job tomorrow and then see how that works out, right? I think you need to prove to yourself that you have the potential. And you also need to prove to yourself that you're willing to do the work and even that you love the thing, right? Because there's a lot of people, it's like they love painting, and they paint on the weekends for 4 or 5 hours, but it's like, do you love it enough to paint 5 days a week for 6 hours a day for the rest of your life? And so it's like you need to find that out because you might just like the thing as a hobby, which is fine, or as a side hustle. But I've been a firm believer all the way along. Before I take any sort of big steps, is kind of doing it first on a part-time thing and just proving, first of all, can I do this? Is there an actual demand for this? And then also thinking, like, what's the jeopardy? Like, if this doesn't work out, am I going to be okay? Right? You don't want to take risks where, at least I don't think so. You don't want to take risks where if it doesn't work out, you're going to lose your house and your family's going to be out on the street. But I think the combination of kind of proving your concept first, so doing something part-time, and then having a plan in place so that, whether it's saving up money so you've got a war chest or knowing I could get a part-time job or whatever, you've got something to fall back on. But yeah, because I look at being an artist and being an entrepreneur, it's the same thing. That's one thing I want to get out there to any artist listening here. If you're an artist, you are an entrepreneur, and everything that applies to everyone else in entrepreneurship applies. But I like the idea, like from Simon Sinek, the idea of you're playing the game that never ends, right? It's the whole idea is just to do well enough so you can get up tomorrow and play the game again, and then again, and then again. So you don't want to take risks that if it doesn't work out, it knocks you out of the game and then your dream's gone forever.
I kind of, a couple of things that came to mind when you were talking about that is that you got to be, as an entrepreneur, you got to be willing to be uncomfortable, and you got to be willing to push yourself to limits that you may not want to do. But that's the true test. If you want to get out there and be an artist and you're just a business owner, it's all similar, right?
It's exactly the same. And there's a lot of misconceptions in there too, though, right? Like there's a lot of sayings that you hear over and over. It's like, oh my God, they're just wrong. Like that one, which is if you do what you love, you never have to work a day in your life. And it's like, no, that should be changed to, if you have the audacity to want to be able to do what you love every day and have the world reward you with a good living, you better be willing to work harder at that than anything you've ever done in your life, because it's not easy. And like you said, struggle is a big part of it. If you want easy, just take the corporate job where you show up for your 8 hours a day and you take home your paycheck. But the rewards that come from being successful as an entrepreneur are amazing, but it's not easy. And, everybody talks about this passive income, that they'll do this, passive income. It's like, well, everybody talks about it. You don't see much of it. And then really you only see the passive income at the end of the journey where you're already so successful, you don't need it. But yeah, it's hard.
Oh my gosh. So true. It's at the very end that you see the reward, and then you're like, I don't need it. But it built your character, built you who you were. I mean, it builds so many things along the way. And I'm sure there was days you're like, you've got a show and you're like, I have no idea how this is going to go. I mean, you talked about that first show. Was that the first show? People were lining up the door and you made more money that year? I mean,
that was 5 years into painting full time.
So what did the first year look like then?
Oh man, it's like I had no idea how to, and I'd already achieved, I'd been elected senior signature member of the Canadian Institute of Portrait Artists. I was elected to the Canadian Society of Painters of Watercolor. I'd sold a fair bunch of paintings. I'd been in a bunch of jury shows, won a bunch of awards, but I had no idea how to translate that into a business. I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing really about how the art world worked and sales and that. So for the first 5 years, I struggled. There was literally, like, my wife, I figured she gave me 2 years, just you go do whatever. But at the end of 2 years, we'll see. And between the end of that second year and the fifth year, when I finally found my current voice and then things took off, about every 3 or 4 months, I thought, oh my God, we're going to be having the talk about me putting on a suit. And then something would happen. I would sell a couple paintings, or I would get a painting in a big show and win an award or something. And I'd think, okay, well, this gives me probably another 3 or 4 months kind of. And I was always just trying to figure out, like, not just the art, but like the business side. How do I take this and turn it into an actual viable business that's going to generate consistent income for me? And I had no idea. And there was nothing out there to tell me that, which is one of the reasons why, once I was successful, I felt that real responsibility to share with people, because most of the things that I learned, not only weren't they being taught to artists, but a lot of the stuff they were being told was actually dead wrong and was the reason many artists were out there struggling. But yeah, those first 5 years, real struggle. There's probably a dozen times during that 5 years where I was, this close to my wife saying, okay, I think we're done. Put your suit on.
Wow. Well, Tim, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I would just say for anybody, it's kind of like, the talk about talent. We think about talent and, we think, either some people have more, some people have less, kind of when we're born, like your natural aptitudes. But your talent is really just the sum total of your skills, knowledge, experience, and creativity. And your ultimate, all 4 of those things can be improved. Your ultimate talent is basically limitless And it's no way predicated on where you are now. So yeah, talent is something that we build. It's not a gift that you either have or don't have.
Tim, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And always share, like, and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one. Tim, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, and you have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. As always, share, like, and subscribe. Go to Instagram at ty.r.brady. And as always, love hearing from you. And let me know what you want to learn on the show or what you'd like me to bring up on the show. Thanks.
You can find the Ty Brady Way on Instagram as well as Facebook. To stay connected with giveaways and Ty himself, go ahead and follow at ty.r.brady on Instagram as well as Facebook. This podcast was recorded, edited, and produced by Whitney Face Media Marketing. The theme music is an excerpt from Hot Chicken of the Woods by Isaac Joel.